and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Got a lot of stuff to go over today. Got one clip coming to you too. We have the first article. This one, I've seen it pop up a few places. I have it right here out of RT. California family called 911 for medical help for their mentally ill relative. Instead of a paramedic responding, police arrived and fatally shot the 18-year-old woman after they say she lunged at them with a knife. And this seems to be pretty frequent. What, do we get a story like this every 2 months? Police responding to mentally ill person and not properly trained to respond. In my eyes, if they are supposedly trained, they're not trained well. It says here the family of Yanira Serrano Garcia said they called 911 around 9 p.m. Wednesday because she was acting erratically and refused to take her medication. And they were hoping paramedics would show up and help. Her aunt told KTVU the 18-year-old suffered from depression. The family had previously received just such medical assistance. Raw Story reported. Authorities said the initial report they received was of a violent female in the streets of a half-moon housing complex who was thought to be armed. 2 deputies responded to the call after the family told dispatchers the woman was mentally ill and armed with a knife that she refused to put down when asked, the San Jose Mercury News reported. We have deputies that were responding to the scene with the information that somebody was acting in a psychotic nature, armed with a knife, and wouldn't put it down even for her own family. San Mateo County Sheriff's Department spokeswoman Rebecca Rosenblatt said to KNTV, the deputy, Mantriu, was faced with a life-threatening situation within 20 seconds of arriving on the scene, according to Rosenblatt. This was an individual coming at our deputy with a knife, intending to harm him, she said. He should be allowed to protect himself, otherwise we might be doing an interview about a deputy not going home to his family and kids. I'm not really going to get in. Well, let me go ahead and read Eyewitness here. Diana Ruiz, a 12-year-old witness, said that she saw True running away from a woman who had her arm raised and was chasing him. I saw the girl running at him with something in her hands, Ruth said, to the gate. I didn't know what was happening. I was really scared about what to do. And she was on her way to a friend's house, said the deputy saw her, stopped, and yelled at Serrano Garcia. When the woman didn't stop, the officer fired. See, now, a thing that also plays into this is, were the cops aware that she was mentally ill? Is there a way that they could have handled it different? There's a lot of things, but see, that this is a problem. This has been happening a lot, and then it seems that when we catch them on camera in these situations, it tends not to be anything like what their stories tend to be. And so we're going to automatically have a mistrust in what they're telling us. And the eyewitness is agreeing with what the cops were saying. But again, did they even know that she was mentally ill? Did they receive that information after they arrived on the scene? Could they have been in their cars and try to, go about this in a different way? I can understand if someone's life is in jeopardy, defending yourself, and I'm all about that. Self-defense is something that is just basic to natural law. But again, when faced with information, we just don't tend to see a different reaction. There's a lot of controversy when it comes to situations like that, and like I said, a lot of times when these situations are actually caught on camera, it's a little bit different than what the official story coming out is. And really talking about, these positions and, basically being hired guns is what officers are, and, that feeds into the military and a lot of any government jobs, and that kind of, that brings me to a conversation, let me try to find it here, that I heard, the CEO of Ares Armor, which I covered the story about them getting raided. They were making the lower receivers for ARs, but they weren't finished receivers, so they abided by the law, but they still got raided after the DOJ overturned a restraining order against the ATF, who had been harassing Ares Armor, and they got a restraining order, and then the DOJ goes, "Hey, judge, take that restraining order off. Let the ATF run wild." But Adam Kokesh interviewed him, and the discussion kind of turned into about the military history and really more philosophy talk about is it right to work for the government, or and being a hired gun of the government, and how much you are being used as a pawn and a tool. And I do have it right here. And I kind of want to play this clip because I really think the conversation is interesting, and it's something that we need to be having more of, that type of a conversation, definitely with the youth, and how, when I almost joined the military, and, it was something I was thinking about, and I really, luckily, I realized that the BS of what you become when you join the military, and luckily I didn't join, but we definitely need the youth that gets propagandized into being part of the military. Definitely with all these war games out here that they play, oh, this is cool, they kind of lose the grip between reality and that fantasy video game world, I think. And then the propaganda, and you see the new military commercials, basically, become a policeman of the world, is how I see it, definitely the Navy ones. But I think it's a critical conversation, and it's better when we understand it ourselves to have that with the younger generations. So let me go ahead and cue this up here.
Is with Ares Armor, recently raided by the ATF. They had a restraining order against the ATF before the DOJ. This is really insane. I mean, this is like a dangerous legal precedent. I hope it doesn't become that. But the Department of Justice, the Department of Injustice, pressured the judge. Like, hello, separation of powers, administrative versus legislative versus judiciary. No. So then, after that, because it was reversed, the ATF raided their business. So, Dimitri, I'm just, I don't even know what to say. What do people need to know about this story first, and how this developed?
Well, the first thing here is the ATF themselves is that organization is the biggest joke I've ever seen in my entire life. They operate completely outside of any sort of law that could even be fathomed to exist. Not only are they, operating outside of the law, they feel that it's necessary for them to essentially create their own laws and create their own interpretations of the laws, and then go ahead and go out and enforce that interpretation without having any legal precedent to do so. Not only that, and this whole thing started because it was a miscommunication. They've admitted that they made a assumption about a particular thing, and their assumption was incorrect, and that's what actually led them to execute that raid. But to justify themselves for the raid afterwards, they actually sent another letter using an argument that they know that they have already lost in court. They've already lost in court. It's in the United States versus Prince. It's already been found that indexing marks do not turn anything into a receiver. It's just like if you have a piece of paper and you draw lines on it, and if you fold on those lines, you can make a paper airplane.
Well, hold on. Let's hold on a second.
It's not a paper airplane. It's a piece of paper with lines on it that could potentially one day become a paper airplane.
Well, hold on, Dimitri. Let's
in court.
Well, let's back up here. And I love hearing this all the technical lingo. But for those in our audience that don't know or aren't familiar with firearms or know what the legal implications of a receiver is and all of those things, why don't you start by explaining what is Ares Armor, what do you produce, and what is the original point of contention here?
Absolutely, and I got one standing by right here. So this is a 80% AR-15 receiver. The difference between this and a normal receiver is that your fire control group is pretty much solid. You don't have any start to the fire control group itself. Also on the side, the safety selector hole, the hammer hole, the trigger pin hole, and the trigger through hole are not drilled. The ATF has deemed in the past that, without those operations being at least started on the receiver, that it's not a receiver itself. So the idea is that our customers could actually purchase this product without having any sort of license or checks or any other of the normal crap that the government usually likes to throw in people's faces whenever they're trying to purchase a firearm or trying to go through any sort of a process. So it's a way for people to actually maintain their privacy and still get into firearm ownership.
Okay, well, let me just make sure I'm clear on how this works. So, what constitutes a legal firearm? The government has various legal standards for that, but it has to at some point be a fully functioning firearm that is capable of firing a projectile. But they also control and legally designate substructures of a functional firearm as legal firearms. In the case of the AR-15, the assault rifle based on the military individual rifle, the M16, the lower receiver, which is what you point out there, which is not necessarily including a buttstock, but that can be considered part of the lower assembly group, right, or lower receiver assembly. And then you have the upper assembly, which is the bolt carrier group, and the barrel. Is that correct?
That's correct. The lower receiver is the only part that the ATF actually requires to be serialized and actually considers to be the part that is a firearm.
Which is kind of funny,
the weapons are all parts and pieces. You can freely buy them over the internet and have them shipped right to your door.
Now, it always struck me as kind of a silly regulation because, if anything, the lower receiver, I know it does lots of other things, but its primary mechanical function is to connect a trigger with a hammer, right? and to be able to feed the magazine up into the in front of the bolt. But the bolt is really, to me, mechanically, it seems like more the gun, right? The bolt and the barrel. Am I wrong? Does this make sense, or is this just another weird government thing?
It's somewhat a weird government thing. The way that it's defined in the Gun Control Act of 1968 is it's an actual receiver. I can't remember the 100% wording that they used, but it's the part that houses the the hammer, the trigger, things like that. And that's actually when they're talking about receivers for any weapon, because whenever they're writing these laws, they have to try and make it so that it's somewhat across the board. And because there's such a large variety of firearms that are out there, it is somewhat difficult to actually interpret this stuff at times. But this is the part that they've deemed to be the actual firearm. And in the Gun Control Act of 1968, the lower receiver would be the part that would be considered to be a firearm underneath the wording that's in there.
Right now, and it's kind of funny if you think gun control. All right, we're going to make certain firearms illegal to own under certain conditions, or we're going to create a specific legal category of what is and isn't a firearm. What they are trying to do, the government's motivation here is like, well, if we're going to make a gun illegal, we also have to make the parts of it illegal, so you can't just slap it together, and that has to have some other legal status, right? So a lower receiver, even if it's not functional by itself, we're going to say that that's legally a gun, right?
Absolutely, and that's actually a very important thing. And in the Gun Control Act of 1968, they specifically, there's two distinct things. One is, a firearm and a frame or receiver are actually completely separated things. And the wording that they use in there is, there's a phrase, readily converted. So readily converted only applies to an actual firearm and does not apply to a receiver. And that was actually done intentionally inside of that act to actually allow people to be able to build at home and to do these sorts of things. And it's very, very, very important that distinction exists in there, because that's actually one of the arguments that the ATF, at least their agents, when they were trying to justify their actions when they came down here, that's one of the things that they said as well, these can be readily converted into firearms. Sorry, bud, these can be readily converted into receivers, and readily is also not even really the right word. It takes a pretty good amount of work to even convert them into receivers.
You guys start drilling.
Receiver, the readily converted phrase does not apply to that in your own law. So again, you're wrong on that count too.
Well, regardless, there's been a legal precedent of what is readily convertible or assemblable, and if you have to bring in power tools and it's an hours-long process, that's not slapping some pieces together and bolting them together. So there's a line that is drawn legally when government says, well, guns are illegal, parts are illegal, but at this point, they don't have any legal status, and you're operating right below that line. And, I mean, you must know that operating right below that line, even if everything you're doing is perfectly legal, because the government doesn't know its own rules and likes to harass people, when they want to step over that line, you're going to be a primary target, right?
Absolutely, and it's also one of those things, these people don't abide by their own laws. So, and this is something that one of the agents actually told to me, or said to me during the actual raid, he was almost apologetic about it. He said that when we got our restraining order against them, that the U.S. Attorney's Office at that point in time got involved in it and actually overtook their operation. So at that point in time, they really didn't have much choice, and the U.S. Attorney's Office is like, go raid them, pretty much teach them a lesson because they embarrassed us publicly. Attaining a restraining order, a temporary restraining order against a federal agency is not something that they're going to look at and be like, oh, that's nice, you got a restraining order against us. But it's also one of those things, like, we got it against you because you were extorting us. You were making absolutely ridiculous threats and all these other events that were going on. So it's this weird cycle that happens, and heaven forbid you stand up to the government, because they're going to try and come down and teach you a lesson. And I think that our reaction to it is very important as well, because these people are a joke. They need to be turned into a joke. So the first thing we did after the raid was start releasing memes of their agents with funny little quotes on them and turning them into the absolute joke that they are.
Yeah.
At some point,
hold on.
I really needs to just point at these people and laugh.
Can you hold
that's
up?
All they are. You can't make this stuff up. About a year ago, I'd seen a news article that had came out. I believe it happened in Ohio, where a woman had called the Humane Society to go ahead and come down and pick up the litter of kittens to take down to their place and put them up for adoption and everything like that. The officer, who is titled a humane officer, shows up at her house and shoots the kittens in front of her screaming children, pulls out a gun and kills five kittens.
Yeah, we know the story.
Tells the kids that the kittens are going to kitty heaven. And this is just an example of what happens when you ask the government to come by and help you with anything. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And to think that what's going on here is really any different than that is I mean, come on. You call them over to come help. And first off, shame on you for calling the government to come and help you with kittens. Oh my God, we've got a kitten problem. Who are we going to call? The government? And so a part of it is the American people's dependence on the actual government themselves. And we need to what's a good way to put this? Get off the tit, so to speak. Handle your own problems. Deal with your own stuff. Stop calling the government and asking them for help unless you want them to show up and shoot kittens in front of your screaming children.
Yeah. Well, Dimitri, you also did 8 years in the Marines. You were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Gotta be pretty disappointing to come home to all of this.
Well, and that's, you've got a very similar history yourself, Adam, and that's the thing, and a lot of Marines that I talk to, and I've noticed this almost across the board, people who spent time in the Marine Corps, actually went out and served their country, or whether it was in the Army, whatever it was, you come back and you start to realize that the people in Iraq have more civil liberties and freedoms than you do in your own country. And to say that you're disappointed with the state of affairs is beyond belief. To feel that you're targeted by your own government because you're a veteran, to have them come out and put you on watch lists and all these other things and say that you're a potential domestic terrorist because you served your country. I mean, it's absolutely insane how we treat our veterans in this country. And then we sit back and wonder why that so many veterans are disenfranchised with this place. And it's almost, we're right here still in Oceanside, California, after I got out of the Marine Corps from Camp Pendleton. I figured this was a good place to stay. And so, we stay in contact with people from the Marine Corps all the time. There's constantly Marines coming into our shop. And I can tell you this. Veterans are completely disenfranchised with their government right now. We've been pushed into a category and thrown to the side, and it's to say that they don't care about us. It's worse than that. They do care about us, and they view us as a threat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And now we hear the comparison: Guantanamo Bay, 1.5 inmates to every one medical care professional. For the VA, it's 35 to 1. Insane difference there. And yeah, if you're at Guantanamo Bay, you're getting better medical care than if you're an American veteran here at home. And obviously, yeah, there's a different environment there, but it's just, I hope that the effect of this is that high school students who would be enlisting are paying attention and realizing that if you sign up in the military, like, this is what you can expect from the government, because you're a pawn. I mean, Henry Kissinger's quote really sums it all up. Military men are like dumb animals to be used as pawns in our foreign policy. And I think people are waking up to this, and I'm really glad that you're taking your story as an opportunity to wake people up to this. What's the takeaway? What is it that you want people to know from hearing the story of Ares Armor?
The biggest thing, and this is actually, there's a news story on us yesterday just about this, where it started out, Ares Armor is defiantly, again selling the polymer lowers that that essentially caused this in the first place. It's a different version that actually goes along with this. But the biggest thing that I want people to take with this is the power of the word no. Especially if you're a veteran or if you're in the federal government and you've taken an oath and you've sworn an oath to the Constitution of the United States, if someone comes around and they tell you to do something that is contrary to that oath or contrary to your morals, it is absolutely okay for you to stand up and say no. And what are they going to do about it? What's the worst thing that they're going to do about it? They're going to throw you in jail? They're going to, who cares? I would rather live the rest of my life in jail and stand true to my oath and actually stand up and say no to these people than to sit on my knees and beg them for every little piece of freedom that I can get. That is not what we fought for. And you being a combat veteran yourself, I mean, you sit there and you think back to what you did when you were in these other countries and what you looked at and what you saw and the experiences that you had. and the lives that were lost. And to come back to our own country and to allow those sacrifices, especially, we're just passing Memorial Day weekend here, to allow those sacrifices to be mooted by a tyrannical government who wants to control every aspect of your life is sinful. And it is your duty to stand up to these people and say no. And when they come by, turn them into a joke, because that's exactly what they are.
Well, I very much appreciate that sentiment, but there was one thing you said that, are those sacrifices, were they really ever for protecting the country? Were they really ever for keeping Americans safe? Or was it really just part of the racket that General Smedley Butler described? I mean, you were in this, when did you go to boot camp?
2002.
Okay, okay, you're just a year or two behind me then. You probably had the exact same green monster. I mean, I've got it on my bookshelf right here. And, it's got that lesson about the history of the Marine Corps, and you read about Major General Smedley Butler as the most decorated Marine in military history next to Chesty Puller, and then they don't tell you about what he said when he came home and what the lessons learned that he were in his book, War is a Racket.
Absolutely. Why he was in those places and who he was actually working for, and that is something that I've looked into. The way that I have to look at this is this. Lives were lost. There was a lot of good people that died fighting these wars. And when it really comes down to the point, whether or not we were fighting to be part of the system, whether or not we were fighting for this, whether or not we were disillusioned at the time that we were fighting and we were doing the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. The fact is that we fought. We stood up and we did what's right. And there was a lot of people who whether or not what they were fighting for is actually the fact that, whether it's freedom or not, the only thing that it comes down to is in their minds they were fighting for each other, and they were doing exactly what they had to do to survive at that point in time.
Well, hold on, Dimitri. I can appreciate that. I can definitely appreciate that. But I want to invite you to consider a different perspective. And I know this is tough. And I know this is tough for a lot of veterans to accept. And it wasn't something that was an easy process for me. But I can tell you, I've been a lot better centered in my life and in dealing with the frustrations of PTSD and everything else that you come home with, and seeing this frustration. Hey, I just risked my life to protect our freedom, and there's none left here. What the hell is going on? If you can understand what government is completely as a racket, and you can accept that by going to war, by signing up as a poor man to die in rich men's wars that had nothing to do with keeping this country safe, you weren't doing the right thing. You thought you were,
absolutely.
But you were a sucker. I was a sucker, and understanding that has enabled me to see government for what it is, and come to a much greater peace about my role in it. And I tortured people in Iraq. I got to live with that, and it's a lot easier.
Let me ask you this, Adam: would you have been able to come to the realization that you came to without the experiences that led you in this path? And I can tell you this: if I could go back in time with the knowledge that I have today, I would not really be interested in fighting a war for this government.
Yeah, no.
Not a chance in hell would I be interested in doing that. However, at the time in my life, these were the experiences that led me to be able to understand what is happening. And without these experiences and without these things, we wouldn't have credence to what we're saying right now. We've lived this, we've experienced this, and we can actually come back and tell people, look, this is wrong. What's happening in this country, what's happening in other countries is wrong.
Ron Paul said, I don't have to go to Iraq to know that the war is unconstitutional. And your argument, it's true. We might be better advocates of freedom, having had this particular experience of being paid killers for government. But that does not, that might be a silver lining, but that doesn't mean it is not a cloud, and that doesn't mean that there wasn't a better way. And I wish that someone had taken me under their wing when I was in high school and said, let me show you what it means to join the military. Let me tell you what it's really all about. Because you want to say that, hey, we learned the lessons the hard way. Guess what? If we don't find a better way, if we don't find something more principled, if we don't reach the earlier generation, if we don't tell every high school kid in America what it means to join in the military, to be a paid killer for government, then we're just going to keep repeating these mistakes. Smedley Butler, World War I, the whole generation that came back from World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Heck, there was Vietnam Veterans Against the War, major national part of the anti-war movement back then. Nope, we didn't learn the lesson. Didn't sink in. And I'm encouraged by the reaction to Obama's attempt to start a war in Syria. that people were revolting within the military. They were putting up pictures saying that I'm against this. Veterans were coming out. It was beautiful. I think that's a measure of the success of the anti-Iraq war movement that I was an active part of with Iraq veterans against the war. But dude, no, like that's not an excuse, you know, to say like, hey, we did it that way. I got to be humble, man. I'm a slow learner. I learned the hard way. Learn from my mistakes. Learn better. And I know you're on the same page here in a lot of ways. But I think the most important people to even hear your lesson right now aren't necessarily firearms enthusiasts, but people who need to understand these dynamics about serving in the ATF. It's, you know, who needs to hear this message? The people who are graduating college and going, it's a really shitty job market. Oh, I know, I'm going to work for government and be one of these douchebags. You know, they're the people that need to hear this. The high school students that go, well, I want to serve my country because, you know, Mary Jane Rottencrotch is going to take care of me when I get home because I'm a big tough guy because I went through Marine Corps boot camp. You know that, right?
I would say that the message shouldn't be not to be a part of the system, but to actually, you know, if you want to go ahead and join the ATF, do so. Just remember your oath while you're inside of there.
Good point.
And the more patriots and the more people that we have that are awake inside of these organizations, the better that it is for everybody, because when it really comes down to push and shove, had there been agents with a set of balls and a set of good morals who actually would have raised their hand and been like, no, I'm not going to go raid a law-abiding business because filed a restraining order against us.
But Dimitri, there were a bunch of agents like that. They just got fired last year as soon as they got on the force. I mean, that's what happens to them. Anyway, Dimitri, if you would please, could you hold up that lower, that prefab lower receiver that you were holding up earlier? I just want to tell our audience about this design here. It says, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, with the American flag on one side. I'd rather see the flag now upside down as a sign of distress. And on the other side, you've got a beautiful picture of the join or die snake from the American Revolution. Are you going to be coming out with like a special ATF edition of that anytime soon? I'd love to see you guys produce something. I know you guys do combat body armor. You do other innovative tactical gear. You do similar prefab kits for 1911s and for AR-10s as well. But tell me you got something up your sleeve to commemorate this whole sordid affair.
We have talked about that, and we're actually going to wait for the court battle to be finished before we put out a victory token, so to speak. But in the meantime, we did release a nice shirt, and we redubbed the ATF what they actually are. And on the front of it, it says the American Terrorist Foundation, and on the back there's two agents, harassing a citizen of the United States, and it says protecting and serving the shit out of you.
Awesome. What's your website?
It's aresarmor.com, ARESARMOR.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Dimitri.
And again, that was Adam Kokesh, Adam versus the Man. And he was interviewing Dimitri Karmas, CEO of Ares Firearms. And, you know, one thing that was mentioned in there is how Kokesh mentioned it, keep repeating the same mistakes, and we're not learning our lessons and learning it the hard way. And we have to break that that cycle of, well, you know, we'll just keep repeating the same mistakes because we'll learn it the hard way. And there's going to be times when you can't get to someone and they do end up learning things the hard way. But we have to be extremely cautious when it comes to that, because you don't also want to push it on someone to a point that they do want to go out and do something. So you can't prevent everything, but you know he's right. We do have to get to a evolutionary period in the human race that we don't continue to make the same mistakes over and over. And, you know, I've brought up the whole anti-war movement multiple times. You know, how many times do we have to go, okay, these wars are not legitimate. They're not for our interest. And, what really bugged me is when it came out, no weapons of mass destruction ever found. They're not there. It's, a farce. And after that, we should immediately have just pulled every troop out of there. But that's where it exposes the real agenda. And same with Afghanistan, and what they have us fighting too is ideology, which means it has no borders, which is their justification for being able to drone bomb people in countries without that country's permission. Because, well, we're not fighting a country anymore. We're fighting an ideology. And I think that's extremely important in a number of ways, but the most important way that's important to realize is that's what they're doing to us, the citizens of the United States. They're fighting the ideology of, hey, you have natural rights, you are an individual, that you are supposed to be a free person, and their ideology is, no, you are not an individual, you are not a free person, you are a part of the collective. And you must be beneficial to the collective. And I think our individuality is what makes us unique as a species, a human race, that we can be different. In many ways we are the same, but we are very, very different. And our ability to think and do the things that we do and, learn the way we learn, and our individuality is so unique to that when we have that ability to, express our individuality and be exploration, get into exploration of whatever you are passionate about. Look at musicians, they explore how to make a different sound, to be different. And in many ways, you might hear music that sounds like older music, but there's something different about it. They've been able to take it and do something different with it that preserves maybe, the historic value of that music, but puts a new twist on it to keep it relevant. And they don't want that. If you look at any type of fascist or socialist country, what ends up happening is digression in society for the collective. And that's the complete opposite of the free individual. And coercion with the use of force to provide for the collective goes against morals. If you have a decent morals, it just goes against that. But for some reason, because we vote for it, people find it acceptable. A lot of times it's because they don't have to do the dirty business. So, you might say it's wrong, but because you're not having to do the dirty business, you're not going to make a big fuss about it. And I think that's one of the fundamentals that is wrong. Okay, I have some more articles here, and this one out of benswan.com, and I'm not positive how to pronounce it, but Tahoma County, this is out in California. Votes to succeed from California. And yes, this is the Jefferson State deal going on in Northern California. Says here, On Tuesday, Tehama County voters approved a measure which requires county officials to consider seceding from California to form a new state called Jefferson. In California politics, there has been a long-standing feud between rural voters and those from densely populated cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. California is an unusually large state in terms of geography, and the policies of its equally massive government sometimes please one county at the expense of another. Rural voters often complain that their voices aren't heard in the California state legislature in Sacramento. 11 sparsely populated rural counties in Northern California cover a landmass equal to many U.S. states, but are represented by only one state senator. Unlike the Los Angeles area, which is represented by 20. This has led many Northern California counties to consider secession, with a plan in place to create a new state called Jefferson. Some counties in the southern region of Oregon are also considering taking formal steps to join this movement to create a new U.S. state. According to the Washington Post, a majority of voters in Tehama County, California, approved a non-binding resolution on Tuesday that would encourage local officials to look into seceding from California and joining in the process of creating the state of Jefferson. Voters in Del Norte County also considered the same measure on the same day but rejected it. Additionally, Siskiyou County voters considered a proposal to create the Jefferson Republic, which failed. In the past, county officials in the California counties of Glen, Modoc, Yuba, and Siskiyou have approved measures to consider seceding from California. The movement to create a new state encompassing parts of Northern California and a few southern counties in Oregon has been building since prior to World War II, though the failed votes in the counties of Siskiyou and Del Norte represent a hiccup in the plan to form a new state. Tehama County vote to look into the idea marks the fifth county to approve such a resolution, giving credence to the view that an increasing number of voters are growing worried of their lack of representation in Sacramento politics. And I'm going to play a clip here from RT, and there's more to the article, but I'll just play this clip here.
The state of California has nearly gone through a breakup. In an attempt to form a new state named Jefferson, one area in Northern California put it to a vote of the people. The decision lay with two counties, Del Norte and Tehama. Del Norte turned it down. Tehama County passed it. This wasn't the first time counties in California have done something like this, though. RT's Megan Lopez joined us earlier from Los Angeles and explained why the vote to secede.
Well, they say they feel underrepresented and over-regulated. A lot of the laws that come out of California tend to be geared more towards the urban and suburban populations is what they believe. They say that they need more legislation to deal with the rural kind of areas, which is where these northern counties are kind of located. So they decided to put it to a vote, these two different counties. This was the first time that voters themselves versus the boards of the counties actually had a chance to kind of give their opinion and really speak up. So this is what happened, just to kind of go over some of the notes with you. Del Norte County measure lost 41% to 59%. Del Norte is a very, very small county. It only has 28,000 residents, so it's just a fraction of the 38 million people that form California's population. Now, the voter turnout for Del Norte was just over 5,000 people, so even smaller fraction of that 28,000 people actually turned out, but that's very typical in these primary elections. And they it's interesting because they voted the same for the governor, for the lieutenant governor, for the attorney general, for the secretary of state, the same as Tehama did in following the majority in these primary elections and the people that they want. So obviously there is some similarities between these northern states, which say that they are very different from the southern state, the southern part of the state, and the southern counties, obviously.
Well, let's say it had gone through. What are the political implications of that sort of change?
Really, there wouldn't be any quick political implications because this was just an advisory measure. So essentially what this said was that the people of Del Norte and Tehama would support the county boards looking into a measure that would one day consider the idea of becoming a state. So it really didn't have much teeth to it. It wouldn't have created a state overnight, but it would have shown some type of popular support. Now, separation, just to kind of go through how difficult it is to obtain any type of state separation, must first be approved by those counties. Then the state, the so-called parent state, would go through the state legislature for an approval. And again, California is very big. It covers 38 million people. And then it would have to go through the U.S. Congress, and that's all constitutionally mandated. And, you know, really at this point, they're just kind of talking about the idea, but it is very unclear at this point. There's been no real talks about how that Jefferson state would eventually be able to pay for a lot of the programs that it benefits from right now, because they are more in the kind of poorer parts of the state. So it's really hard to determine how they would pay for things like government mandated health care, for education, for their water, for things like that.
Okay, so this vote was essentially letting the county boards know what they may already have known, which was citizens' sentiments on this. But this isn't the first time this happened in California. I mean, it's got a history of this sort of thing. Is that right?
It absolutely has a history of it. And so let's start with some of the more recent history, and then I'll get you to how this movement for a Jefferson state kind of started. So the Board of Supervisors and a number of other counties in Northern California have already voted for this. I'm talking about Glenn, Modoc, Siskiyou, and Yuba. They agreed to join this Jefferson Declaration. 2 more counties are set to vote on it next week, but so far we don't know what kind of turnout we're going to see there. And the total population, again, just to show you how kind of small this is 467,000 people that would vote. But it makes up a size that is over, that is twice the size of New Hampshire. So it's quite a bit of real estate that we're talking about. Now, how this Jefferson Declaration idea came about, and the idea of a state of Jefferson, goes all the way back to the 1940s. Jefferson was going to be part of Southern Oregon and Northern California, about the size of West Virginia. But those people had really bad luck. The day that they were supposed to sign to agree to make a separate state from California was December 8th, 1941. That's historically important because December 7th, 1941 was the day that Pearl Harbor attacked. So on December 8th, the U.S. decided to go to war with Japan. Obviously, World War II efforts took over, and then the idea of Jefferson kind of went on the back burner and has been there ever since.
What about statehood efforts elsewhere? Because there are other hot spots in the states where people are talking about separation, getting their own state, and all of this. Can you just explain that to us really quick?
Yeah, we've seen a number of different kind of parts of states decide that they wanted to try. Their efforts have never really succeeded. Probably the most notable of those is the District of Columbia has been fighting for representation. Also, Puerto Rico has been fighting for representation for quite some time. And by representation, I mean they don't really have any say in presidential votes. They don't have a senator. They have a non-voting congressperson who's there. So they had a 2012 referendum, and what the majority of the people decided was that they don't want to be the Commonwealth that they are, but they might want to consider a state. But a recent GAO report showed that might not be fiscally responsible.
All right, Archie's Megan Lopez in Los Angeles for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, one thing I want to address here is if you listen, she talks about they're some of the poorest, and what about the water, and what about all this? a lot of these people are, you know, you got to remember they're rural people. They don't have a lot of money. They have more wealth when it comes to, they have property. They have, you know, they probably grow a garden, have some livestock. They have a well that provides water. They don't have a city hookup like the urban areas do. You know, they might not have money. That does not mean that they are unhappy the way they might be living. If they're rural people, they might like living rural. You know, I don't want to live in the city because I like living rural. If they come out here and just go, well, you know, we need to make it more city-like, it's kind of defeats the purpose of me living out here. And we too often see that happening closer to bigger cities. And that becomes an issue. You see people that move outside of the city, and I've talked about this before, but they move outside of the city, outside of city limits, more rural area, but near the city, since that's where your stores are usually located, not out in the middle of nowhere. I'd rather find the ones that are out in the middle of nowhere anymore. But, you know, they don't want to live too far away from a store if they need something, but they don't want to live inside city because of the rules and the regulations and the higher taxes, and they don't want to pay for all the downtown development. They're not interested in that part of it. They're more interested in, I just need to be near a store, but not too near a store. I can drive a few miles, but I don't want to be in the city. Then you see all these people that move outside the city, all of a sudden they're annexed. They're part of the city all of a sudden. And you're like, whoa. I didn't get a vote in here, and it just happens too often. So, you know, I support them in this. Be interesting to hear any of your views out there. 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. 718-717-8296. Whether this will actually get any ground, I think it's more possible looking at it today. But I think when it was a big movement in history, you heard them talking about the history of it and pre-World War II, and it's something that I don't know if just because it gains traction with the people, whether they'll allow it to happen. And I think them going, well, you know, what about water, and what about all these utilities and paying for the health care? Well, they only need to bring in enough to pay for the people that live there. So if it's a rural area, has less people, that's why they get less representation within California. Well, now they'll have proper representation, be able to properly take care of themselves. And, well, maybe as a state they might nullify Obamacare, and that'll fix that problem. I think because of the libertarian view and traction that I've seen come out of that area of California, a lot of the rural people are, you know, they're not the typical California liberal that everybody talks about. They're quite different. They have a little bit more libertarian-leaning views, and I think there's a problem with that and what the government wants, and I think it becomes too much of a risk for government to allow it to happen. I don't think that, and I don't think you'll see the California liberals allowing that to happen. And like they said, constitutionally, they have to go through the steps, and well, have to go through the legislation of California, which is basically control. Looks like we have Vince calling in. Let me go ahead and get him on here. Vince, buddy, what's up?
Hey, Josh, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good yourself.
Doing pretty good. Yeah, I think it would be a very interesting experiment, and if it was allowed to go forward, let's start with one county, and if it starts out as a state, and then there's a chance of maybe moving on towards the republic. At least that's a start. A state is still just another part of that corporation, but like all things, we've got to be able to move positively in the other direction as opposed to the system is, and to back out.
Yeah, and that
just slam it shut.
Yeah, and that's something I talk about because I in my ideology and in my beliefs, I'm a hardcore libertarian type person. But I do recognize that we can't just change it overnight. That's why I'm willing to work with the constitutionalists, because I understand that's a step in the right direction. And I think when we go further that direction, it helps to also open people's minds to that libertarian ideology of the individual and freedom and liberty. And I think that you're able to help move people past that ideology that somehow the Constitution is what guarantees your freedom and liberty and your rights. That's just an outline. That's, a elegant piece of paper, but in the end, it's your individuality and the rest of the people respecting each other and not using force against each other. That really is freedom and liberty.
Right, and I was saying last night too something pretty similar to that, and it's a declaration, the Constitution. It was kind of like a little contract those guys got together, and of course it's not the same contract that most of us suppose it is, and it's not binding anyways because it's outlived its signers. So it's still, though, to me, it's a declaration of what it means to be a free person. So that's why I too support people that are constitutionalists and so forth, even though they don't really understand that the Constitution exists for the corporation. And that's what, the state of Jefferson would still be part of that corporation. But then when you start working on a small level like that, wouldn't the real estate go up? People would flock, right? If that's what they want, given an opportunity, then people would flock there, and, it would prosper. And then people could say, look, we don't want to keep contributing to this monstrosity, this beast, this corporation nation, and, we just want to be, our own little deal here. And, if you guys want to do some trades, maybe we can sign some treaties, some trade treaties or something like that. But in the meantime, you folks in D.C. and all your lobbyists and all that stuff and all your big money and the powers that be, shove on. We're going to do it our own way over here. And Drew from Double Cross, he said, man, I'll be there in a minute. And it's like, I'm thinking, me too, man. Man, that would be awesome to be a part of something like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be a great experiment. And, I think that was the intent of the Free State Project. And even the thing going on, Free Detroit, the anarchy community up there, which...
New Hampshire?
Yeah, and I think, though, that by creating a new state and giving the ability for those few people in those northern counties to actually feel more empowered, I think would be something that would, gain traction among people where, when people actually start feeling empowered, they become more fearless in their ability to exercise their rights. And I think it would be a real good experiment.
Absolutely. We got folks here at UCY.TV involved with that. Dodie and Chuck Horton, that's also on Double Cross Radio. And Dodie's here in the mornings with Indy and Jules. Lots of people involved with that. People that are intelligent and free thinkers, smart people that are not, bound by this caste system that, so many people of America, fall into. And just, do so without even knowing or even considering. It's just, the way things have always been, and, it's been working, and, things are bad, but, surely somebody in the government's going to fix it. That's what they're there for, right?
And, that's the thought of many people, and I feel a lot freer when I realize if I want something done, I got to do it myself. And in the end, regulations and all that mean nothing when it comes to my livelihood. And understanding that makes you kind of a freer person. But then, because you operate your life in a certain way, then you become a target. And, we see that happening quite a bit lately.
We a long time, right?
Right.
Will Cooper, just for example, I think, he was targeted. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Anybody that resists too big against the powers that be, whether it be the petrochemical companies, or anything, the power sources and stuff. If, somebody comes up with a really great idea, if they can't be bought off, then they're eliminated.
And when you look at people that try to live more of a solitude lifestyle, or not even solitude a lot of times, but just more of a old school lifestyle, let's put it that way, the mountain men type people like Eustace Conway, then you see all this BS corporate fiction come into play where they go, well, your buildings aren't up to code, or this or that. And it's not until the people go, we don't care, you're not going to bother this person. And then all of a sudden, you'll see those people back down. And we've seen that with Eustace Conway. They backed down and they basically said, okay, because this is, more of a, I forget what they called it, trying to think of the word, but basically they said, this is this date type structuring, and it'll be okay. And it was because the people came out and said, no, this is how people used to live for, decades. There's nothing wrong with it, and allow this guy to live the type of lifestyle he wants. If he wants to be a mountain man, let him be a mountain man. It's his property.
Right, it's again, something that I was touching on last night about, the natural law of things, the natural order of things. And, if an animal's hungry, it finds something to put in its belly, and that's just the way things go in this world that we have. And for most of mankind's history, man's been able to go out there and catch him a fish or a rabbit, or, dig a plant up and, use it either medicinally or for food. But now everything is, owned, controlled, regulated, licensed, and so on. That a person, where can they really exist in a free state? And a state's just not, the boundaries that Nevada, or Arizona, or California, or whatever. But actually a place, an idea that exists in, however you might put that into words, a realm, or a person exists in a state of freedom. Pretty hard to find that, really. I mean, where can you truly be free? I mean, you can exercise your freedom until somebody comes up and says, look, no, we can't have none of that. And matter of fact, we're going to need a little revenue, so, pay up.
I think there's still parts of Alaska that you need a bush pilot to get to, that you might be able to live free, but that's going to be a harsh lifestyle too. But
the military-industrial complex is pretty much taken over the whole world. I mean, even if a sovereign leader in some other nation state decided that they wanted to withdraw from the world system of the petrochemical dollar, and maybe trade in their own currency, and maybe they're going to decide to back up by some metal or whatever. And anybody deciding to go and cancel that central bank usually is targeted for removal from their sovereignty over that nation. You see that time and time again.
You brought up the fishing and being able to forage, being a natural right, and being here in northern Indiana, you know, I've fished. That's something I do. There's lakes everywhere. But I get a permit. And that's not because I believe in being permitted to fish. I believe that's my natural right to do. It's because we have DNR agents everywhere. It is heavily enforced. And it literally threatens my livelihood. And because it's so widely accepted by people, I don't have any recourse to that. I don't have where a community is going to stand behind me when I go, I'm not getting a permit to forage. You know, and I think that's where, you know, things like the Jefferson State or the Free State Project, those are critical for these movements to be able to get off the ground for that. You know, the whole concept of natural rights, the non-aggression principle, that you can't go, well, 51 of us believe that the other 49 should be ruled over by force, and if you don't obey our, you know, law that you can't do this without a permit, then we're going to come at you with guns. These type of things are things that can be used as those experiments for a truly, you know, free lifestyle. And a lot of people go, well, you know, if you don't have government, there's not going to be any rules because you don't have rulers. And I think the concept of rulers is kind of misguided, that you have to have rulers to have rules. And I think rulers come out of a idea that, well, we're going to take this opportunity to say, hey, we can fix those problems that of those, you know, rule breakers. And I think it's a fallacy that you can't have rulers that are efficient unless they become tyrannical. You can't have rulers in a free society. You there, Vince?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was rolling smoke and forgot to unmute there. Yeah, that's the thing. If some people feel like some other people has to know what's better, how we'd be better off, and so that's why we trust these officials. And you know, if recent history has not shown that the people in offices across the nation supposed to be representing us are not there for our benefit, but for their own, and see that the system is, you know, it's controlled the whole way through. It's a rigged game, and it's time to say, hey, look, let's scrap this right here, and we'll start by sending, you know, people that we can know and trust locally, and start them in there, and hopefully, you know, they're not going to go in there and be corrupted by the system, but go in there and let's affect change in a local, just like, you know, they're doing up there in the state of Jefferson. Let's act locally, let's bring it about, and let's educate each other, our neighbors, one another, people we meet on the street, you know, total strangers. Say, hey, did you realize, you know, there's any number of things that one might talk about. So, you know, let's go forth and conquer. Hey, brother, I'm going to jump off here. I'm fixing to go post up for Jimmy Boiler Room Radio coming up after you're done tonight. Big lineup. Every hour we got a new show all night long. So everybody stay tuned to UCY.TV. And Josh, who's your rock, man? You're my hero. You get up here twice a week. It was be more than that. And you can deliver, you know, what really matters. So keep up the good work. Yeah, and I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you too. Take it easy, man.
All right. Talk to you.
Later.
Bye.
And again, that was Vince here from UCY.TV. You know, there's a real important thing when you're looking at, you know, what is liberty. And if you don't have the ability to exercise your rights as a natural human being on this planet, to provide for yourself without people stealing from you or using force against you, you are not free. And that's a concept I think that's lost to society. And I hope that seeing things like Free State Project, seeing all the liberty-oriented alternative media popping up, seeing things like the Jefferson State thing being really brought back to life, and the idea of that, being pushed, is a sign of things to come. Because if not, I think if these things are allowed to fail because of people's fear, we are going to go down a road that we've seen other countries, other empires, other nations go down. And that's the collapse, the complete collapse of America. And when I see government grasping for control in every aspect of your life, that's what I call the death throes of an empire. And it's not going to come fast. It's not going to come easy. It's going to be slow, and it's going to torment people. It's going to torture them. It's going to be so slow that you don't see it coming, and it just a little bit more hurt, a little bit more hurt. And it's one of those things that, it's like someone that's dying that they don't know that they're dying at first until it's too late and they can't do anything. And I think there's enough people waking up that if we start now, we have a slight chance of preventing that by voluntarily scaling back what government is until we can come to the conclusion that we just don't need it. The idea of government is obsolete. It's outdated. It is the definition of insanity. Government is. Every form of government has been basically proven to fail to adhere to preserving the freedom and liberty of individuals, because it is the complete opposite of that. And I think that's where the main part of the whole concept falls short. So, it's something that we need to look into. And since I played Adam Kokesh earlier, he has released his book, and if you go to adamversustheman.com/freedom, he has the free downloads, audio, all that. I started reading it, and so far it's pretty well written book. So, if you're looking into the philosophy of freedom, there's one source. You can look at Bastiat and, so many, go Mises website, and, they have a lot of books that you can get for free. There's a lot of sources out there that have free books. Really start reading into the whole philosophy behind freedom. And maybe you do come up to a few different conclusions, and that's, why we libertarians always like discussing liberty with each other, because we're trying to refine what liberty is. We don't want any hypocrisy in our beliefs, and that's why a lot of us that were part of the beginning of the modern day Tea Party, that were Ron Paul supporters, a lot of us aren't voters anymore. We've taken that revolution into an evolution, and we're looking past the concept that, voting's going to help, because we've tried that. But a lot of us still understand the concept of let's start scaling back now and start going more towards the local side of it and your county and things like the Jefferson State Project. That would be a way of getting more local when it comes to government and being able to actually have a little bit more say in your life and to prevent tyranny. And no, nothing's going to be perfect. Liberty is not perfect. Bad people will do bad things. What the whole concept of, the libertarian ideology is that, well, government doesn't usually solve those problems. Government has gotten how big, we haven't stopped theft, we haven't stopped murder, we haven't stopped, drug use, we haven't stopped alcoholism, we haven't stopped war, haven't stopped rape. Yeah, we really haven't stopped any bad crimes. But if anything, we've actually given government or the tools of government this monopoly over some of those crimes. That's where the real issues come into play. Okay. Give me a real second here. And Stefan Molyneux, he put out this one. It's pretty quick. It's not too long. The truth about Stefan Molyneux, and I want to go ahead and play this guy's for you. So I play a lot of Stefan Molyneux. I figured this would be a good one to play.
So I do a lot of these truth abouts. And they're always... I mean, I don't know if they're trying to be sinister or something, but every now and then, people will say, oh yeah, you think that's the truth about Nelson Mandela? I'd like to see the truth about Stefan Molyneux. Dun, dun, dun. Like there's some giant mothership where we keep all the fertile women bound up and inseminated by giant hydra-headed snakes ridden by Hercules, or some weird, magnificent stuff, or some sinister. Don't talk about the mothership. There's only one reason that the mothership is still alive anyway. But I mean, there's nothing interesting really. But I will tell you the truth about me, if it's of interest to you. It certainly is what drives me, and it's not a secret. It's in everything that I do. But this is the truth about me. The truth about me, my friends, is this. No one who wants to come to the future need be left behind. No one who wants to join progress gets left behind. I made it out. I made it out of the abuse. I made it out of the tyranny. I made it out of the hysteria and the hypochondria and the violence and the disconnection and the chaotic stone ape brutality of my origins. And part of me wants to just keep running straight over the horizon to the cathedral of the future that I built for myself here in Canada and stay there and keep everyone else at bay. But I don't like a lot about the Marines, but the one thing I really like about the Marines is no one gets left behind. They even go back for bodies. But no one gets left behind. And I got out and I took my time enjoying being out. But after a while, I really could no longer ignore the reality that I was out, but very few other people were. I was out of the prison planet cage of abuse. I was out of Plato's cave. I was out of illusions and delusions, and I had found improbable, mature, connected love, satisfaction, happiness, joy, connection, love. And I always knew that I had the skill and the intelligence and the verbal fluidity to do the dance that dislodges the demons. To yodel the high octaves of truth below the snow-capped mountain so that the avalanche of bullshit falls and reveals the glowing peaks of personhood in people. And I felt that the good thing to do, the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do was to go back. To go back, not to drag people, because you can't drag people. Not to push people, because you can't push people. But to go back into the hell I came out of and to invite people to get out. Not to go in and bomb someplace and drag people out kicking and screaming with shrapnel in their leg, but to walk through the walls and past the guard. Because when unreality becomes a ghost to you, you become a ghost to unreality. And you can walk through the walls of propaganda and nonsense, which seem firm and matrix-like to everyone in them. You can walk right through that prison. You can walk right through the guards and all they feel is a warm trickle, like they just peed themselves a little, and walk down the corridors and with a breath and a blow, you can open the doors. And you can say, you don't have to stay here. You can leave. This is the past. This is falling away into the chasm of history. This is the ape-like prehistory of our species that has made it to a place of cell phones and fluorescent lightings almost entirely because not enough people have circled back who got out. And say to all of the people licking their chains and beating each other with their manacles, and all of the people cowering in the corner, like the beautiful ones of the endless mice utopia experiments, and say to them, hey, the door is open. Do you want to go? Do you want to leave? It doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to live like this. This is not life. You don't have to be a man trying to mate with ghosts until you become one. You don't have to be a man trying to do CPR to mummies generations dead. You don't have to bond with your beaters. You don't have to have affection for your abusers. You can have a standard and a principle of love and connection that entirely surmounts, repudiates, and escapes the historical interspecies predation of our collective histories. So come on, come on, come on. You don't have to stay. Through that tunnel, through that wall, over that fire, through those guards with their razor-sharp swords that never come out of their scabbards if you don't believe in them, you can get to light, to sunshine, to butterflies, to birds with rainbows for wings, and unicorns and all the glorious and great things in life that you think are only myths, but are the only real things there are, in fact. The only truth about me that matters is that I made a commitment years and years ago to go back and to offer to anyone who wants to listen and who is willing to work, that no one who doesn't want to be there has to stay there. That no one who wants to come to the future needs to stay in the past. That nobody who wants to be free needs to accept their chains. Because if one person can do it, anyone can do it. If you see one person walk through the walls of a prison, guess what? It's no longer a prison. It is only a prison of the mind, because we cannot walk through real walls. And if someone comes back and offers you the vision of having walked through the walls and walked past the guards who slumber on the eaten hearts of their own offspring, then it's possible for you, and you, and you, and you. No one who wants to be free need rest in their chains. Many people gave me that gift. I am doing my best to offer that gift to everyone else. The example and the encouragement and the interaction and the cross-pollination of the future with the past. Despite all the walls and all the barriers and all the prejudices and all the cultural moats and canyons and firewalls that are supposed to keep the enlightened from the ignorant. We're supposed to escape, but we can go back and we can help others. That's the only truth about me that matters. That's the only truth that means a damn thing. And that's why I do what I do. Because it meant so much to me that a few people in my life came back and helped me. I know how powerful it can be to be exposed to something better than what you have had to endure. I know how powerful that can be. Like most of us, that's why I ask people, how is your body doing? And they say almost always the same thing when they're in a connected conversation. My heart is pounding, my hand is sweaty, I can't think, I'm 1,000 thoughts of charging around my head, and I say, that's because there's a crack in the wall. That's because there's a crack in the wall. That's because there is no wall except what you've been told. And you can walk away from abuse, and you can walk away from exploitation and blood sacrifice and intergenerational predation. You can walk away from the whole unnatural, immoral, predator-prey relationship that characterizes so much of turning and biting humankind, of the wheel of history that only ever rolls downhill. It doesn't have to be your life. It doesn't have to be the lives of your children. It can all end. It can all stop. You can move outside it. You can move beyond it. You can move past it. In the past, when we were 200 people or 100 people in a tribe, there was no escape. There was no escape. Now we can move, we can change, we can reinvent ourselves, we can find our own tribe, we can find the tribe of truth, which is not a tribe, but a genuine connection of rational minds. It doesn't have to be what came before. We don't have to accept the pension of our prior combat, for good and for ill. People are coming back to help you as they came back to help me, as I'm coming back to help you, and Mike is coming back to help you, and other people are coming back to help you. They're walking through walls. You can too. That is how the world heals. That is how the children are protected. That is how the wars end, and the rapes and the assaults and the vanity and the environmental destruction and the predation on the young, on the future, on the money, on the planet that currently characterizes what we laughingly call civilization. But we can have the true civilization, which is the civilization of voluntarism, of being guided by principles rather than history, of choosing connection rather than conformity. All the things that we know we are capable of, but we don't believe in because we've not seen it. And we are all empiricists. And that's why I try to show people in my actions, in my deeds, in my courage, in my conversations, what is possible. What one person can do, another person can do. So join us. Right? You don't want to live like this. You don't want to live trapped in this blood-soaked, amber, skin-encasing prison of history. Just join us. You have no idea. Let me correct that. You have an idea deep down how beautiful it is to be in relationships without censorship, without control, without hierarchy, without win-lose, without avoidance, without bullying, without manipulation and slammed doors and pettiness and haughtiness and bullshit, which is what all of that stuff in aggregation is. It doesn't have to be your future. The choices of those who came before are not your physics. The choices of those who came before are not your physics. They remain your choice. And I thoroughly and encouragingly and joyfully invite you to step out of the prison of history, individually and collectively, and let nothing come between your heart and other people. Let no cloud of history, no scar of history, no downtrodden hoofprint on your face of history come between your heart and its connection with good people. If you cannot connect with the people around you, strive to find people you can connect with. But let no cloud of history come between you and who you can connect with. That is how history wins. And don't be what remains when history wins, which is nothing but a shit stain on the ass of the planet. Don't be that. Only connect, as E.M. Forster said. Only connect, only connect, only connect. With truth, with reality, with empiricism, with reason, with each other. Speak your truth. If people recoil, find new people to speak your truth. Continue to speak your truth. If people recoil, find new people with whom to speak your truth until you can connect. And be who you are in the presence of others. Relish your existence. Relish their existence. And connect. Without vanity, without makeup, without push-up bras, without the right car or the right haircut or any haircut for that matter, without enough money, with too much money, in the wrong neighborhood, in the right neighborhood, with the right bands, with the wrong music, who cares? Only connect. Only connect. And when we connect with each other, we free the world. And that's the only truth that there is around me.
Again, that was Stefan Molyneux. The truth about Stefan Molyneux. I'm going to go ahead and bring up a few articles here. And hopefully that clip was inspiring. Definitely follow your passion. A lot of people, they'll stay in their dead-end job and go, well, you know, I need to stay stagnant in my prosper. You know, I'm not going to prosper any more than this because, you know, I have a family to take care of. And they're being trapped, and you know this is a continuing thing throughout history where you're again trapped in a low end job, and you're made to think that you're not going to be any more than that. Well, you don't have some 10-year degree, so you're not going to be successful. And there should be enough entrepreneurs out there to prove you wrong. And it's one of those things, you let go of that fear. And if you want to help your children out, be prosperous now. That way you can provide the things that you would like. And that doesn't mean that you have to be extremely rich, but don't let a dead-end job hold you back if you're miserable. If you have a passion for something, there's something out there that you can do to make that amount of money, but not be feeling like you're a slave to the system because you have a passion for it. Even though you'll be stressed at times and whatnot, you will still have a passion. Therefore, and you'll be your boss, so you won't feel enslaved to it. It'll be on your terms, and then how much you prosper is how hard you're willing to work and how good of an idea you have. You have to be willing to fail too. That's another thing. But I have an article here out of the Libertarian Republic. EPA climate rule labeled Obamacare 2.0 could harm electrical grid reliability. Opponents of the Environmental Protection Agency proposal to limit carbon dioxide emissions from existing power plants have labeled the rule Obamacare 2.0 because it mandates states to alter their energy sector, much like the Affordable Care Act mandated states to alter insurance markets. Others have labeled this proposal Obamacare 2.0, and in many ways it is. Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said on the Senate floor Thursday, protesting the EPA's new rule. The administration insists there will be no cost increases associated with this rule. All that is missing is an awful website and a pledge that if you like your current electricity bill, you can keep it. Murkowski added, the president promises that electricity bills will shrink, but I'm not buying that. Yeah, regulating something makes it go down. Yeah, The EPA's new rule called the Clean Power Plan mandates existing power plants cut carbon dioxide emissions 30% by 2030. States are responsible for setting standards to meet those cuts within a range of options proposed by EPA, including increased energy efficiency, more green energy production, and setting up cap-and-trade programs. Excuse me there, I had to blow my nose. Republicans, some states, and many in the energy industry have opposed the rules, slamming them as a massive federal intrusion into states' rights. The rule has also been attacked for forcing coal-fired power plants to prematurely shut down and for setting the stage for higher energy costs. And no one understands what will happen if states refuse to move forward with their own plans, Murkowski said. Does anyone really think EPA has the ability to impose its federal will while simultaneously keeping the lights on and power affordable in all 50 states? Murkowski's main reason for taking the Senate floor, however, was to highlight a little reported concern over the cumulative effect of EPA regulations, grid reliability. Utility regulators and Republican lawmakers have expressed concerns that EPA regulations have underestimated their impact on the power generation which could pose a huge threat to the reliability of the U.S. electrical grid. We still do not have an accurate accounting of the cumulative costs associated with all the EPA's rules, but we do know not to trust their math because EPA has dramatically underestimated power plant retirements in the very recent past, Murkowski said. For example, the EPA said its mercury and air toxics standard, MATS, would retire 4.7 gigawatts of coal-fired power by 2015, but labor unions disagreed and said the rule would retire 55 gigawatts of coal power. As it turns out, the Energy Information Administration, an arm of the U.S. Energy Department, says that 60 gigawatts of coal-fired power will be shut down by 2020, with 90% of these retirements coming by 2016, the year MATS goes into full effect. EIA even notes the coal retirements could be pushed even higher depending on certain economic and regulatory conditions. Coal power capacity could be reduced more than 70 gigawatts if coal plants continue to shut down at an accelerated rate. Poor forecasting by the EPA means the reliability of the electrical grid will be threatened due to coal shutdowns, as coal serves a baseload power for much of the country. This means the coal provides a constant minimum rate of power throughout the day needed to keep the lights on. Sometimes green energy like wind and solar is unable to do. And you can read the rest of that at the Libertarian Republican. You know, as we do this, our industries keep moving to places like China that don't have all those regulations. So it's one of those things that, you know, this does nothing for the environment. That's a whole fallacy, and it's again part of their agenda. And talking about that, I wish I would have saved the website. I don't seem to have it. I found the article on the Blaze, and it was pictures of Detroit then and now, and they were street views, and I went to the original website with a lot more pictures and videos of collages of these street views. And you look at these streets, and they start in 2008 and end in 2011. And you look at these pictures, and 2008, it starts out with a street full of homes. Sometimes you see a whole bunch of people out, you know, in the neighborhood, kids playing, people getting in their cars, people sitting on the porch. Houses aren't spectacular condition, but they're actually, you know, decent looking homes. They're not bad. It is a urban area, so, you know, it's not big old spectacular houses, even though there were a couple photos. But anyways, you know, 2008, all these people out there, you know, these homes occupied, and it'll step down to, you know, 2008, 2009, 2011, or 2008, 2010, 2011. And you look at where the street full of houses and people were within those few years. There's maybe 3 houses standing, maybe one of them occupied, maybe. Boarded up, the other one's burnt down or bulldozed down. Weeds and just brush growing everywhere. You see historical buildings, homes, and commercial that just within those few years disappear. The state of Detroit is extreme. I don't really think people understand the dire straits. And when these cities like this die or become so crime infested that causes them to die, all these other people have to go somewhere. That's understandable. But I hope these people are leaving places like Detroit and finding the faults. Why did Detroit fail? And the problem is I don't think a lot of them are. Again, we completely, go 360 and repeat the same mistakes over and over. And maybe some of them are. Who knows? Okay. Give me a second here again. I've seen this one, so I definitely wanted to bring it up. This one's from benswan.com. Startup could stop feds from controlling the web. With the use of mesh networks, internet users could create their own networks, bypassing government controlled or government spied on ones. Give me a second as my Internet Explorer flips out. Or not Internet Explorer, but my browser. A startup called Open Garden is looking to use people's own cellular phones, according to Forbes. Over the past 2 years, 5 million people have downloaded the company's free Android app, Open Garden, to create wireless hotspots, and its Fire Chat app for iPhones and Androids to chat anonymously with other users off the grid. The Fire Chat app isn't perfect, but what's tantalizing about both services is that they need no Wi-Fi connection or carrier plan to get connected. Just another person with the app within a 70 meter radius, reported Forbes. A mesh network refers to the creation of peer-to-peer mesh of smartphones that form their own separate network. If at least one smartphone is online, the rest of the network can not only talk to one another but connect to the web too. This has caught on in places where the government could try to censor its people, like in Taiwan, where around 100,000 activists in Taipei had taken to the streets to protest a trade agreement with China, and local blogs urged them to download FireChat just in case the government shut down web access. There's been similar interest for FireChat in Iran. Users in the country have started 1,800 FireChat groups, making Iran the second biggest user of the app after the United States. People can grow their own network, said FireChat founder Micah Benolel. So, that's pretty interesting, and I think more things like that are going to come out, and what I hope to see is the ability to reach longer distances. I think is going to be a key thing. I don't think it'll work long term, future wise, unless we can start getting a lot better signals across farther spaces. they try to stop things like that, and that's one of the issues I know we have with trying to set up long-range mesh networks. Just like in radio, broadcasting on the airwaves, whether it be micro or big, you're being regulated. You can go buy those little things at the store. You plug in a headphone jack, and you can barely get them to have a strong enough signal that your MP3 player in your vehicle can get to your antenna on your stereo. So, it's heavily regulated, and I think that's the main thing that we need to try to figure out a way to overcome is long-range meshing. Because I think then, the possibilities are enormous. Again, it's another one of those experiments that people are looking at, and it's a positive thing. I really think it is. We have about 10 minutes left here, so give me a second. And I seen this one on Ben Swan, and I had to find it real quick, but I know there's a lot of people out there that listen to me that support NORML and hemp legalization and pot because it's a nonviolent crime. I think the war on drugs is useless and a waste of taxpayer money, and it does more harm than it does good. So I leave people to their own doing, and whatever you want to do, you do, as long as you're not harming other people and their rights, abridging their rights and their property. I think you do what you do. Since recreational marijuana became legal in Washington State, and this is Al Ben Swan again, coffee pot, ? Entrepreneur combines coffee and pot. Entrepreneurs are creating a budding industry in new edibles, including one combining coffee and marijuana. Adam Stites of Longview, Washington, has come up with a line of cold-brewed coffee-infused drinks he cleverly called legal beverages. It's amazing what the free market has done with the legal marijuana industry in Washington and Colorado. The coffee drinks give you an uplifting head high. We called it the wake and bake drink, he told mynorthwest.com. Each bottle has about 20 milligrams of THC, which he said is intended to be enough to give consumers a pleasant high but won't make them completely baked. The beverages will be regulated by the state just like any other marijuana product. Stites has applied for a producer and processor license and expects approval pending final state inspection in the next few weeks. He hopes to also launch a line of pot-infused sparkling juices. And again, that's from benswan.com. I think there's been a lot of success in the states that have completely legalized it, like Colorado and Washington. And I think it's been a big actual, I hate to say it, but if you look at it from a politician's view, they should be all about it because this has brought amazing revenue into the state. And so, even looking at it from that point of view, which is not all that positive, it has some positive points to it that, a lot of these politicians are just greedy people that are self-interested, so therefore this should be something that they should be into, and stopping the war on drugs because, well, it causes a lot more problems. A lot more problems. I don't know if any of you have been following much, kind of just feeding off of the whole marijuana thing. Activist Rich Paul, he's been a excuse me, woo. He's been an advocate out there, and I want to say he was defending someone by grabbing something to defend someone now, violation of probation, and wielding a weapon is what I'm getting from everything. He was arrested on probation violation, though. And, but according to what I've seen on here, about his whole situation, and I'm getting this from Derek Freeman, that, no bail for Rich. Rich Paul will remain in jail pending a violation of probation hearing, date to be determined. And he talked to him at 4:32 p.m. He wants to know when his next court date is. Is there a way to make outgoing phone calls through debit instead of collect calls? And he wanted to say that Rich loves you. So, any of you that follow any of his activism, just to let you know what's up. Coming up right after this broadcast, Boiler Room Radio with Jim Funky. Always great information. He goes in great detail, and I know Vince was getting him already on Facebook posting and doing all that, and always great people in the chat room. Pretty interesting conversations. You know, you go in the chat room, they'll talk about politics, about philosophy, about working on cars, working on the farm, gardening, and, you know, prepping. A lot of these people are living that type of lifestyle and are pretty well knowledgeable in a lot of these areas. And a lot of the hosts also hang out in the chat rooms. You know, Vince that called in earlier in the broadcast, you can find him in the chat room usually. JJ and others. And, you know, we have some great loyal listeners, and they're always in the chat room chatting it up. Always check that out. Check out all the broadcasts here on UCY.TV. Great host. Just great people all around. You know, a lot of the broadcasts have open phone lines. Maybe only certain nights. Some don't. Some do when they have guests. But, you know, interact. Get in the chat room, interact, and become part of the discussion. You know, you can sit here and listen to us speak and listen to other people speak and watch documentaries, but, you know, the main thing is you really have to start becoming a part of the conversation. You have to become a part of the movement, and you have to truly be the change you want to see. And, you know, every aspect of your life is a reflection of you, and I think when you become more concreted in your ideology and more in line with your beliefs and understand your own beliefs, that it makes it a lot easier to live your life by your beliefs. I think when you have a issue living your life by the way you say you believe, It's because you don't really have a grasp on your fundamentals. And it's a thing that you continue to learn. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and I'll catch you next Wednesday. Take care and have a great weekend. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv.